We're in the midst of a comic book to film renaissance that has been bringing our favorite heroes to the big screen, some for the first time, some in a new light, and many that general audiences aren't familiar with. But what about the villains? A hero is only as good as the adversary offering the appropriate challenge, so in this list I'll be counting down the best of the baddest, the evil, the conniving, the dastardly ne'er-do-wells, in the top 10 best comic book villains on film. Besides Heath Ledger, I mean really you're probably expecting him to be at the top anyway, so we'll leave him out of this one. Number 10. Ra's al Ghul from Batman Begins. Or Ra's al Ghul, if you prefer. When the biggest problem fans have with the character is the pronunciation of his name, that's gotta be a good enough sign that all other aspects are covered well. In a movie filled with other key villains, from muggers to mob bosses to scarecrows, Ra's al Ghul stands out as the Dark Knight's main antagonist, even beginning as Bruce Wayne's mentor, until their ideals about the fate of Gotham City clash and they become enemies. Liam Neeson plays the role with effective conviction, perfectly setting the tone for Christopher Nolan's more grounded Dark Knight trilogy. He's not hamming it up and laughing maniacally. He doesn't have a generic cheesy plan for world domination either. He has a scheme much more sinister in destroying Gotham City, and more importantly, he truly believes it's the right thing to do, and in some scenes he's actually very convincing about it. While maybe the source material's aspects about achieving eternal life through a magical pit seemed a little too far-fetched for Nolan's movies, Ra's, much like Batman himself, stands as a symbol, and as evidenced by The Dark Knight Rises, his work and ideals continue, even beyond his death, and in that sense he achieves immortality, making him a very formidable foe. Number 9. Big Boy Caprici from Dick Tracy. When an actor takes on the role of a comic book villain, some take a darker, grittier approach, while others tend to ham it up, and oftentimes with disastrous results. There are few actors who can go over the top at expert level the way Al Pacino can, and his role as Big Boy, a mob boss with a huge vendetta against Dick Tracy, proves why Pacino is one of the all-time greats. This is a gloriously over-the-top performance, with Pacino expressing under pounds of elaborate makeup, working as sort of a parody of mob boss characters, including some from his own movies, and truly feeling like a comic book strip character has leapt from the pages of the panel and onto the big screen. Big Boy is a highly entertaining character, thanks to the unique design and most definitely thanks to the great performance, which earned Pacino an Oscar nomination for Best Supporting Actor, making this the first time in history anyone had been nominated for playing a comic book character. Not a bad milestone. Number 8. Harley Quinn from Suicide Squad. While not a villain specifically for Suicide Squad, Harley Quinn certainly is one in general, and despite being a hugely popular character in the DC universe, originally appearing in the animated series and quickly integrating into the comics and general Batman lore, in over 25 years she had never actually appeared as a character in a movie. Well, Suicide Squad changed all that, and although fans had gripes with many aspects of the movie, most will confess the one thing they got right was Harley Quinn. With a design unique to the film, but a manic, off-the-wall, crazy and funny spirit remaining true to the source, Harley Quinn proved to be an easy standout of the ensemble cast, even overshadowing the Joker, who was the more hyped about character, who ended up having like 5 minutes on screen. But anyway, Margot Robbie has set the standard of how the character should be done, and let's hope to see more of her very soon. Number 7. Top Dollar from The Crow. Long before Heath Ledger's Joker stood for anarchy and carnage for its own sake, there was Top Dollar, played by raspy-voiced character actor Michael Wincott in The Crow. This is a character with no real motive other than to cause pain and suffering to the people all over the city, which makes him truly frightening and truly evil. Not to mention, with the addition of his sister, or his lover, or both, they key the character into something more supernatural, and they show this character can be more brains than brawn when he has very quickly discovered that Eric Draven's powers can be exploited through the Crow. He's a sick and twisted and evil villain, and it fits perfectly with the dark, R-rated nature of the film. See, a comic book movie can still be good and be rated R and dark. Give it a chance, DC. Number 6. Dr. Octopus from Spider-Man 2. Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2 stands as an example of how you can make some pretty severe changes to a comic book villain while maintaining the same overall spirit and creating a new modern interpretation. There's no jumpsuit, no goggles, no German accent on this version of Doc Ock, but from the terrifying hospital scene in which Dr. Otto Octavius emerges as Dr. Octopus, to the more conservative character design, this is a fascinating new version of a classic character that fits perfectly with the movie's tone. The character is even largely sympathetic, with no direct ill will towards Spider-Man, treating him more as a nuisance in order to rob banks and raise funds to continue his scientific research to honor his dead wife. And we all know how terribly wrong that kind of concept can go. This is a character that isn't wholly evil, and even has a nice moment of redemption, but it's suggested that his robotic tentacles are truly the ones in control. It's pretty cool how each tentacle seems to have its own personality, making them more than just props, but actually a living part of this villain. And for my money, the fight between him and Spider-Man on the train, it still has to be one of the most exciting and awesome showdowns in a comic book movie. Number 5. Catwoman from Batman Returns. Let me tell you something. I love Anne Hathaway. I love her. She's unbelievably gorgeous beyond description. She's one of the best actresses working today. I mean, have you seen Les Miserables? She's incredible in it. But her version of Catwoman in The Dark Knight Rises has nothing on Michelle Pfeiffer's from Batman Returns. I mean, sure, it's not the most comics accurate. She doesn't do any cat burglaring in the movie, if that's a big deal to you, and maybe the scene where Selina Kyle is thrown out the window, dies, and is resurrected by a bunch of alley cats is a little far-fetched, but hey, that's Tim Burton for you. All other aspects of this character considered, though, this psychologically damaged antithesis to Batman is the best we've seen on film so far. Hathaway, you did a fine job, and thanks for everything, Julie Newmar, but Pfeiffer is where it's at. For one thing, you have to admire her commitment to the role, getting sewn into that skin-tight vinyl every day, putting live birds in her mouth, having to deflect Danny DeVito's sexual advances, which may or may not have actually been in the script, and giving a convincing duality to the character, and showing the struggle between Selina Kyle and Catwoman, much like the struggle between Bruce Wayne and Batman. And while she definitely holds her own against Batman in a physical brawl, and definitely uses her sexual prowess against him, the biggest challenge Batman faces in going up against her is the fact that he knows they're very much the same, and he knows she has the potential for good, much like he has the potential for evil. They're kindred spirits in that way, but unlike something like The Dark Knight Rises, where they run off and live happily ever after, this representation is frank enough to know they simply can never be together, which I think is ultimately true to the characters and makes this version of the character one of the very best. Number 4. Bane from The Dark Knight Rises. So maybe Rises didn't have the perfect Catwoman, but it had just about a perfect Bane, albeit with quite a few changes to what we've come to know from the comics. He's still a muscular badass, but no wrestler mask with giant tubes of venom sticking out, nothing like that. Instead, there's a facial mask, which works as kind of his life support and disrupts his speech. And yeah, let's talk about the voice Tom Hardy uses. It was something risky, it was something different. It at least made the character stand out, though. And don't tell me you've never cupped your hands over your mouth and tried to do a Bane voice. You know you have. Admit it.
When Gotham is in ashes, then you have my permission to die.
But for the most part, they stayed quite true to the character and to many elements of the Nightfall storyline from the comics, including Bane releasing all the prisoners of Gotham to run amok, and the infamous fight in which he breaks Batman's back. Bane's not just a muscle-bound punch machine, though. He's a very clever villain, and his extremely intricate plan involves not only bringing Gotham City to its knees, destroying Bruce Wayne's wealth, breaking him physically, but also breaking his spirit, which is the agenda of a more than adequately fiendish foe. He'd probably even be a lot higher on this list if it weren't for the fact that, admittedly, he does go out like a little bitch in a very disappointing fashion, but oh well. Number 3. Lex Luthor from Superman the Movie. He's a criminal genius, he's obsessed with real estate, he's extremely boastful and arrogant about his own intelligence, and he's not a really big fan of Superman. Richard Donner's Superman captured just about everything we know and love to hate about Lex, so much so that we can forgive Gene Hackman for not going completely bald for the role, save for a few scenes. Shout out to Kevin Spacey for taking that plunge. It's a very funny performance, and Lex's slimy, cocky attitude serves as the perfect complement to Christopher Reeves' somber, honorable Superman. Lex Luthor is a businessman. He knows a good deal when he sees one. He makes some pretty evil, unethical decisions, but he does it with a smarmy grin, and he makes no apologies. This is how Lex Luthor should be, not some twitchy little twerp.
Yeah, Jolly Ranchers.
Number 2. Magneto from the X-Men series. Some of the most compelling villains, not just in comic books but in general, are drawn in various shades of gray. None serve as a greater example of this than Magneto, played by both Ian McKellen and Michael Fassbender. We've seen this character evolve throughout several films in the X-Men series, old and young, past, present, alternate timelines. We've seen him as a straight-out villain with evil schemes, we've seen him as a reluctant ally to the X-Men, and we've even seen him as a conflicted anti-hero. This is one of the most interesting and well-written comic book villains on film, because we never really know which shade we'll end up seeing, and with each movie circumstances may change to alter the path he takes. He's unflinching in his convictions that mutants are superior, and he'll take any means necessary to rise against his persecutors. Many times he makes such a strong case that even we question Charles Xavier, his longtime friend and advocate against his measures. The biggest reason why Magneto is such a great villain is that many times he doesn't seem like one. Number 1. Have you ever danced with the devil in the pale moonlight? The Joker from Batman 1989 version. I know, after all that I'm just substituting one Joker for another, but even considering the excellent Oscar-winning portrayal from Heath Ledger, it's hard to think of a comic book villain that was more impactful than Jack Nicholson's Joker. He set the standard. Sure, the 1978 Superman blazed trails by bringing some much-needed casting credibility, including Marlon Brando and Gene Hackman, but Burton's Batman, with the inclusion of Nicholson, moved past credibility and turned into a worldwide phenomenon. It was Batman versus the Joker. It was a huge deal. It was the movie comic book fans and audiences everywhere just had to see. And never in the history of comic book adaptations has there been such a clearly perfect casting. When you hear anyone talking about Jack Nicholson's Joker, you're likely to hear phrases like born to play and most obvious choice thrown around, and for good reason. Regardless of your feelings towards the movie, whether it's aged well or not, whether Christopher Nolan's movies are arguably better or not, whether some of the writing was hokey and the whole switching of the backstory to make the Joker the murderer of Batman's parents is completely silly or not, Jack Nicholson and the character of the Joker is so good, it's easy to look past all that. It was a match made in comic book casting heaven. The Joker is a demented psychopath, unpredictable, mischievous, and oddly charming. Nicholson brings an energy and madness to this role that's hard to top, whether he's taking down mob bosses on his way to the top with an extra voltage hand buzzer, poisoning the city's shampoo, soap, and makeup, or trying to romance Vicky Vale after dancing around to the latest Prince song. He's kinda crazy like that. The Joker's wild and Jack's the king, and that, Jack, is why you're my number 1 guy. So that's my top 10 best comic book villains on film. Did I miss any of the big ones? Let me know your picks in the comments below. Give me a thumbs up if you liked the video, and be sure to subscribe for more top 10 lists, movie reviews, and a whole bunch of other stuff. Comment, rate, subscribe, all that good stuff. Visit Derek237.com. Until next time, I'll see you later.